Excellent. We are now live on Facebook again. I am Primal Piggy, and you can find me on Facebook at The Primal Piggy. I'm also cross posting this video today to Whips, Chains, and Duct Tape. I help admin and create content for that site, and you can find that on Facebook at WCDT BDSM. That website has been around since 2012, so they have been providing online BDSM education and resources, talking about nonviolent consensual BDSM for over 8 years now, and so really proud about that. And today we're going to be talking about something that was once almost exclusively part of the master-slave MS dynamic, and now because of the growing popularity of BDSM, you're finding some of these things are starting to grow in popularity in other types of dynamics, not just in authority exchange dynamics, but also in now power exchange dynamics, and even in some power neutral dynamics. So if you can find a video on those different types of relationship dynamics on my page, the Primal Piggy, where we talk about power neutral, power exchange, and authority exchange relationships. But I'm not really going to go into that today. That video exists, and so we don't want to recreate the wheel for that. I have some notes, and so I'm going to pull up my notes here. And so, in the world of BDSM, many couples use a collar, and collars can look like different things. Generally, they're like a piece of leather, at least, or sometimes they're a chain worn around the neck, and they can, sometimes they somewhat look like a choker. In certain circumstances, some collars can look just like a necklace, but oftentimes it has to do. There's some type of lock or a D-ring or something like that on a collar, and because they symbolize the ownership of one partner by another. They're commonly worn by submissives, but then there is one type of collar where it's like a play collar, and it is a piece of bondage equipment, and it can be worn by anyone who's playing in bondage. And it's a collar with D-ring or a D-ring or D-rings around your neck, used just in a bondage scene or in a bondage scenario. And it would be worn with possibly also like wrist and ankle restraints and maybe thigh or other restraints. And so commonly those are leather or some type of vegan leather material, and those are used just for play. We're not really talking about play collars in that sense. We're also not really talking about the type of collars that are just ordinary chokers or like jewelry necklaces worn by like a punk or a goth or somebody. We're not really, talking about those types of collars that are just like a choker that has no meaning at all. We're talking about collars exclusively with BDSM. And so, I just want to separate those two. And then towards the end of this video, we'll briefly talk about protocols and rituals, because collars, protocols, and rituals are borrowed in other dynamics from the MS dynamic. And so they definitely have a more prominent place in an MS dynamic, but they can be really useful in a DDLG or a DS dynamic as well. And so really they now, what was once exclusively MS, now they belong really to all of us who participate in BDSM. But we definitely want to draw from the past, because they got a lot of things right, and so they really kind of drawing from the past is really good, because there are significant meanings for these different tools that we have to use in our relationship dynamics. And so we want to draw deep down from the well of others' experiences. And so someone wearing a collar to symbolize his or her relationship status is called is said to be collared. So if you are seeing someone online and they're saying that I'm collared, this is what it means. It means that they're wearing a collar and as a submissive partner, and their collar is a symbol of ownership to by one partner and another. And so for some, collaring a submissive or a slave is a real private thing. And for others, it represents the opportunity to publicly recognize a relationship, much like a marriage ceremony. There's different types of collaring, and so we'll get into those different types of collaring, but it is really a overall collaring is a lot like a marriage ceremony in that it is a commitment. Every single time, every type of collar is a commitment of some varying degree. And so we want using collars apart from fashion, but using collars in BDSM, apart from fashion and play, using collars in BDSM and using protocols and using rituals are very serious things. And so we just want you to, we want to set the tone that we're talking about something that is about commitment. And we'll talk a little bit about Velcro collars, in like a non-commitment type of collaring, just a little bit later. But collars have very different degrees of significance within BDSM. A person wearing a collar may wish to signal that they're a submissive, or they want to or that they're signaling that they're owned or in a relationship. A lockable collar further symbolizes a transfer of power or authority, an exchange of power or authority from the person wearing the collar to the person holding the key. And a lot like chastity, where you have someone wearing a device and someone holding the key, the person wearing the device commonly the submissive, and the person holding the key commonly the dominant. It signifies that power exchange. And so sometimes, because obviously a collar would be inappropriate in some business settings, submissives sometimes wear them only in private, but oftentimes they'll wear a necklace or a chain. There's some things that are called like day collars that are instead of being like a leather band with a lock or like a choker, they'll look more like a necklace, and so they'll fit in with the attire. And so it's possible to see someone you thought was uncollared wearing a collar in a scene, because there's those play type collars that people wear only for scenes, like the bondage type. And so if you see someone wearing a collar, it doesn't always mean that they're a collared submissive. So just take note of that. Oftentimes it's best just to ask somebody, I see you're wearing a collar. Are you collared or are you uncollared? I'm just inquiring. And so there's different, let's talk about a few different stages of collaring. So some in the BDS community use what's commonly 3 stages of collaring. Under this system, the first collar is considered a collar of consideration. The second is a training collar, and the third is a permanent collar, or borrowing from the MS, a slave collar. And so a collar of consideration is worn for a negotiated period of time. However, either party can remove this collar at any time and for any reason, ending the relationship. And so a collar of consideration is a serious step. It's a signal to other DOMs that the couple has begun a relationship. So in a vanilla kind of sense, this is like we're stepping into a serious dating stage. We've been through vetting, we've been through negotiations, and we've been through somewhat of a contract, and we're beginning to um, step into a more serious stage of our relationship. Sometimes during the negotiation process, a collar of consideration will also be used just to when someone is beginning to just really be in a more serious situation, a serious dating situation where we're starting to see a draw out of the public sphere into more exclusivity in a relationship. And so this is when a collar of consideration would be used. And so it's just saying that, look, I'm off the market. I'm working on negotiations and working on an agreement or a contract with this specific dom. And so while we're working through things, working through all of our different discussions on things, I'm wearing this collar of consideration. And if we come to an agreement, then I'll keep the collar, and if not, then I may remove the collar and end the relationship. And so next is a training collar, and usually it's similar somewhat to like an engagement ring. And before moving to this level of collar, most have spent a substantial amount of time discussing mutual likes, dislikes, needs, and wishes, and both parties are considering the real possibility that this relationship is going to be more permanent. And it's going to be a lot more of a long-term relationship. And so out of the collar of consideration, we would move into like a training collar situation. And now when a dominant is now in the training a submissive, they're telling the submissive the expectations that they have with the relationship, and they're telling that they expect that the relationship will continue. And so let's look. There's a few things that you need to consider before putting on a training collar. And so before accepting the collar, a submissive should already understand what's expected from a relationship with that particular dominant. And once collared at that level, the submissive's behavior directly reflects on the dominant. And so within the community, the broader BDSM community, when you're collared, everything you do directly affects on the character and the reputation of the dominant. And so if you're wearing a training collar, you're really, stepping into that process that I described in the previous video, where the dominant and the submissive are beginning to mold, and the dom is becoming a dom to the submissive, and the submissive is becoming a submissive to the dom. They're beginning to mold and change their relationship, conforming their relationship one to another. The dominant type is now responsible for this person. And unless pre-negotiated, this dom would no longer have close relationships with other submissives. It's starting to draw into more exclusivity. And so the submissive type may struggle with submission and commitment to one person, but the submissive type is now, when wearing a training collar, saying that they're no longer available to other dominants. And so they may feel some of their personal freedoms that are beginning to be restricted, and that's part of submitting. You're starting to exchange some power. And so that's why they call it a power exchange relationship. And so oftentimes this also feels quite elating, quite good for submissives. And so this really, you start to get quite a bit of fulfillment at this stage. And so this collar indicates a deepening relationship where the dom is teaching the submissive about the ways he or she wishes to be served. And at this level, either party may end the relationship, but the breakup is going to be a lot more serious. And so if you think that that the relationship isn't going to last, then you really need to end the relationship during a collar of consideration. and not really allow it to get to a training collar. If the person, if either the dom or the sub, if either of you have just serious things that you really can't fix, then don't continue to build a relationship. You could always be just play partners and not be in a relationship like that. And so just, a power exchange relationship is serious, and it's not for everyone. And so sometimes people will try to use a training collar as more of a mentoring relationship. I would advise commonly against this. For the most part, this will a lot of times come online these days. But if you have a real established BDSM community, this may be an option for you, a very real world, in real life community where you know the dominants and you've been around them at different play parties and events, and just within community you've built a really strong community. You may find a dominant who is more of a mentoring, more of a training type of person that is more of a protector. And so it's more of like some people will wear a training collar somewhat as a protector, and it's a dominant of high standing in the community and is treated as just a mentor. This relationship commonly is not sexual, and so just kind of, I would advise against it if you're trying to do it online. It's more of if you have a very established community, you've attended lots of munches together and events, and and the person is of high regard and high respect. And so just, a training collar may be used but generally speaking, a dominant, because the dominant is molding himself to the submissive, and the submissive is molding himself to the dominant, him or herself, sorry, then commonly that is the period of training. If you're not doing that molding, then it's really hard to train a submissive for somebody else, because not all dominants are the same, and of course not all submissives are the same. And so we're individual complex people, and so it's really hard to do that type of training for somebody else. And so the third type of collar that is commonly used is a permanent collar or a slave collar, if commonly that terminology is used in the MS. The final collar is referred to as a permanent collar, and this is considered by many to be like a wedding band. The submissive or slave is now regarded as formally owned by their dominant. At this stage, the collar is considered permanent and would only be removed for a very, very exceptional reason, like an ongoing cheating or something like that. Something really really extreme. And the slave would not have the authority to remove the collar. Doing so would also end the relationship. And at this stage, the dom doesn't release the slave for any aspect of service failure, because that indicates that the dom's a failure on the dom's part to train the submissive. And so we wouldn't if someone's difficult to train, you don't move past the training collar into the permanent collar until you work out those kinks, and work out those issues. And so you enter from a training collar into a permanent collar when you've completed the training process. And so this can be months or years. It can be a long period of time. And so people have different periods of time that they move from a collar of consideration to a training collar. There's no set time frame. It's really specific to your relationship, and it's serious every time that you move. And so let's talk about a couple special use collars. A seam collar is used by tops and bottoms, and it would be placed around the bottom's neck during a scene to show that the top is dominant just during that scene. And it's only really appropriate if the bottom is already an uncollared submissive. And so you really wouldn't want to try to remove someone else's collar just to put your collar on them. That would be somewhat bad protocol or bad etiquette. And so there may be a scene specific collar, and generally that's more of a bondage collar, like a play collar. It wouldn't be like an official collar. There's sometimes what's in the MS, there was what was called a house collar, and it's a collar of protection. Again, this is when there is an established BDSM community, and there's events, and there's times when people get together, and so when someone's new to the community, it can be intimidating to go alone to a play party, and people can be uncomfortable. And there's a process within the BDSM community for helping newcomers in social settings, and they may be offered protection from an established dominant, usually someone well known and really respected, of high standing, and they'll wear the collar of protection, and it's just really kind of like a collar of guidance. And it's anyone wearing a collar of protection who wishes when a submissive is wearing a collar protection, any dom or dames who wish to communicate with this person on email or FetLife or in person need to obtain permission from the protecting dominant. So if you ever see on FetLife that someone's under the protection of, generally speaking, this isn't done as an online thing. This is done within an established, in real life BDSM community. And so a lot of times these different types of things are getting drawn into the online realm, and they're somewhat shady and sketchy. And so really just dominants should not be offering themselves online, trying to do things that you can't really do online, that you can really only do in person. And so there's like these training collars and collars of protection, or saying that I'm going to train you, or saying that I want to be your protector, is really going to be problematic. And first off, it's problematic because it's hard to really know the dominant's character outside of the community. Like, you really have to have been to some lunches together and really kind of met somebody in real life to know their character. It's really difficult to do the type of vetting needed to know that somebody's not just trying to get something sexual out of you or use you in some way. And when a lot of times when submissives are asking or approached about training or protection, they're in a very sensitive state, a very vulnerable state, because they're either inexperienced or they're new to a community, or they're new to BDSM in general, and so there's somewhat of vulnerability. And so some people will get sucked into this protection/training scenario, and really it's just someone wanting to play online, video chat, and basically get something or use somebody for something, just generally speaking. And so, don't fall for it. If you're new and you're watching these very foundational videos, don't get sucked into a protection or a training scenario when you don't really know the person. And so that brings us to what is a term that's generally called the Velcro collar. And it's usually applied to online relationships where one or the other partner has a series of fairly brief collared relationships. In real life, the term Velcro collar refers to a dom who extends a collar without much thought about the commitment and obligations that accompany the significance. And it really kind of leads to a very distorted experience of what BDSM is all about, and people can generally get really disillusioned with the lifestyle, and it's just generally really bad for everybody involved. Oftentimes, the Velcro collar is kind of a prerogative term. It's not really, it's not, it's, you know, a Velcro collar would be one that doesn't really have a lock. There's not a real significant exchange of power, or, you know, it happens way too fast and it happens a lot. And it's just really bad for the reputation of the dominant. And it's really bad, just overall, a lot of bad experiences come to submissives in those scenarios. So really, you know, you got to give a lot of thought to the commitment and the obligation of collaring. There's also a term that is called the invisible collar, and it describes like a period of after a breakup where you know, long after the relationship, or after a relationship is ended, a certain tug of feelings that just don't go away. And so collaring is so significant that, you know, after a collaring relationship is ended, you may feel somewhat of an invisible collar is on. It's like, to the extent that something is left unfinished, you'll feel that the connection didn't resolve completely, and that you're left with somewhat of a psychological connection that, you know, may take longer to fade than you expected. They say when something is, you know, a collar can be a powerful tool in a power exchange relationship, or an authority exchange relationship especially. And so you can kind of feel the effects of a removal of a collar. So it's really significant. And so, you know, we want to take a lot of care in using collars, because of the symbols that it's like passing out wedding rings, engagement rings, different types of things. Like a collar is a very significant symbol in our community, and we want to give it a lot of respect and honor that it really deserves. And so let's talk a little bit about protocols and rituals. I'm not going to get really involved with this part. I just wanted to mention them as we're building a foundation, that they really are, even though we can utilize them a little bit in other relationship dynamics, they really are mostly exclusive to MS relationships. And because the authority over a submissive is really limited in a power exchange relationship, and so like a DS or a DDLG. So protocols are often used within well, actually, there's two different kinds of protocols. There's personal, and then there's scene protocols. Personal protocols are often used within an authority exchange relationship, like an MS, as a way to create a governing structure. They're less common in DS, of course, because there's not really an authority transfer as much as there's just a power transfer, and it's really kind of limited. So slaves' personal protocols reflect how the master wishes the slave to behave in various settings, and how the master wants certain things done. A master will establish different sets of protocols for different slaves in their service if they have more than one, and protocols are relationship specific. And so really, you know, protocols, and somewhat referred to as high protocol, are how certain things are to be done. And you'll oftentimes see protocols within rituals. And so we'll kind of put the two together in just a moment. But rituals, they set a tone for something that is about to happen, or it's happening. A lot like a religious ritual, there's a certain amount of theatrics involved. And rituals are used in authority transfer relationships like MS to set the stage for repeated events that involve a lot of focus and a lot of bonding. There can be rituals before scenes, or rituals when one partner comes home from work. Rituals, they help build expectations and focus your anticipation on the impending event. They bring like a ceremony to the event. And so most commonly, rituals are a series of activities, and they're governed by protocols, and they're strung together into a sequence that represents a preferred way of doing something. Like I'll use a like more of a high protocol dining experience. That's a common thing that you'll see in MS community. Within that ritual, um, uh, you may have different protocols that concern who sets the fireplace, how the fireplace is set, who lights the fireplace, and when it gets lit. And then you may have all different types of protocols about how the appetizers and the cocktails are prepared, and how they're served, and how the lights and the candles and the music are set up, and what everyone is wearing, and how everyone is addressed, how the silverware is laid out, how the just everything can be set up to add a lot of ceremony to the event and somewhat of theatrics, but also it's really a lot about paying attention to details, and it's really a lot about bonding and improving focus, and helping the submissive grow into learning how to pay attention to details, and how to follow rules, and how to begin to submit more and more. And so, how to grow in their submission. Rituals are really powerful things, and they're a lot like religious rituals, but they're like if BDSM was a religion, it would be like, that's our way of doing like like a certain thing. Like you wouldn't do a Christmas ritual at an Easter service, and so at Easter time, and so you would have a specific ritual that would set the mood for the specific task. And so protocols and rituals, they play an important role in our BDSM world. Um, in public, perhaps at a munch or a play party, they may help us identify who likes to play and how to play. Um, you know, in a relationship, they're used to increase that interpersonal bonding, and they help us grow one towards another. And really, ultimately, collars are that same kind of thing. They're about the bond, and they help. They are a significant tool showing that bonding that is occurring. And so that submissive has a sign with them all the time around their neck, with a lock and possibly and keys and locks, and it is a constant reminder of their submission to the dominant, and it helps them really grow in their submission. It also helps a dominant get in the mindset of being a dominant towards that submissive. I know with me, I am oftentimes reminded of the importance and the significance of my role as a dominant in that relationship, because I have collared my submissive. And so when I see it, I'm always reminded that I am committed in that relationship. It shows me that I am somewhat married to that relationship. I am in covenant with that submissive. And so things that come with the collaring are deep commitments to the relationship and to growing. Like I've said in the past, relationships aren't all about play and sex. There are different aspects of growth and goals There are just, there are things that are within a BDSM relationship that allow us to grow and to move forward and to progress. And so, anyways, so that was a brief overview of collars and rituals and protocols. And like I said, we get those primarily from the MS dynamic, but as it's kind of BDSM has grown in a lot of popularity, we are starting to see collars are really coming to the forefront of our BDSM communities and are being used a lot more. But we want you to recognize the significance, the commitment, the obligation that's involved with collaring, and we want you to take them seriously. We really want this foundational series to help shape the community in the way we want it to see it, the way we want to see it, and we want to see it grow, and we want to see it be stable. We don't want to see people continue to get hurt online by entering into these Velcro collar situations, and we don't want one person seeing it as very significant and another person being haphazard with it. We really want a more equality of people using or recognizing the significance of these collars. And so, anyways, you can find me on Facebook at The Primal Piggy. Put the @ sign and The Primal Piggy, all one word. You can also find me on Whips, Chains, and Duct Tape at the @ sign WCDT-BDSM, both on Facebook. You can also find me, if you search Primal Piggy, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Twitch, different areas. And so, as always, these are, I should have probably said it at the beginning, but I might as well say it now. This was a mature content. BDSM is not for minors. It's always for adults, and it's always nonviolent. Or the BDSM that I teach is nonviolent, and it's always consensual. And so, thank you very much for watching this video. I look forward to more in the future.